Hey everyone, my name is Alec and welcome to another edition of MASL Midweek, where I break down the past and predict the future for the MASL. We have all sorts of games to talk about from last week, and I also want to talk about some news that came out of last week about the retro jerseys that St. Louis and San Diego will be wearing. So we'll start off by talking about those games from last week. Now, these games featured a lot of the same teams playing each other in different combinations. A lot of this was part of the Sunshine Series in Florida, where you had Tacoma, San Diego, Ontario, and Florida all playing each other. And then on top of that, you had Kansas City and Dallas playing a couple of games against each other. And because of that, I'm not going to go through each game and break them down individually. Instead, what I'm going to do is talk about each team that played this week and talk about what I learned from them. We'll start off with the teams that I found to be least surprising and work our way up to the teams that I found most surprising. We'll start off with the team that I found to be least surprising this weekend, and it's actually two teams tying for this spot. Those teams being the Dallas Sidekicks and the Kansas City Comets. These teams played two games against each other this weekend in Kansas City, and the Comets won both of those games. As I said, no real surprises here. Kansas City, they looked really good, especially their offense, and Dallas didn't look like they were playing to their full potential. If you've watched this series over the past few weeks, I've been saying that over and over again, so no real surprises from these two games. Next up on my list is another team that really, I didn't find their performance this weekend to be that surprising, and that is the Florida Tropics. They did lose two of their three games this weekend, despite being the team that was hosting the Sunshine Series. They lost their games to Tacoma and San Diego, but they did beat Ontario on Sunday. And I know this may have been surprising to some because they were the team that was hosting the Sunshine Series, and they're regarded as one of, if not the best team in the league. So to see them lose two of their three home games was a little bit surprising, and I'll admit it, I did not see that coming. But I'm still not really thinking about this team any differently. We know this team is not perfect. They're really good, but arena soccer, it's really hard to go undefeated for a season. They've already lost a game to St. Louis, so we knew they weren't going to be perfect. They were also playing some teams this weekend that were really good. San Diego, Tacoma, and Ontario are all really good teams. They managed to beat Ontario, who we'll talk about in a minute, who I think is a very good team. And then they lost to San Diego and Tacoma in overtime. So they were very competitive in those games. On top of all that, the Tacoma game ended with just a weird, funky bounce that was just one of those things you just kind of have to shrug at it and just move on. Weird arena soccer bounce. So yeah, I still think Florida is one of the best teams in the league. I still think you could argue that they are the best team in the league. I don't think they're going to win every game. I'll probably keep picking them to win a lot of those games, but I recognize they're not going to win every one of them. So this weekend didn't really tell me much about Florida. I wasn't that surprised by their performance. Yes, I thought they were probably going to win all of the games, or at least win two of them. So I was a bit surprised they lost two of the three, but not that much. As I said, playing great teams, close games, and they beat one of them. So that was my thoughts about Florida. Next up on my list is another team that I didn't find to be that surprising, but this weekend did confirm some of my thoughts about them. That team is the Ontario Fury. A couple weeks ago, the Fury played against the Ambush. They played two games against them, and they swept the Ambush in St. Louis. And I was speaking some very high praise of the Fury after those games. But some of you very rightfully pointed out that St. Louis was badly hit by COVID that weekend. So this weekend comes around, they're playing against some of the best teams in the league as part of that Sunshine Series, and they win two of the three games, and they won some of those games in very convincing fashion. This team is fun to watch. Their offensive attack is something else. I may just be me, but their passing attack is precise, it is fast, it breaks defenses down, And when you combine that with the fact they have scorers like Frank Tayu, the Fury's offense is terrifying if you're playing against them. If you're watching them, they're a lot of fun. Now, add in the fact that their defense was playing really well this weekend, and Ontario looks very much like a title contender. Now, they did lose to Florida, which is another team that is very much a title contender. But still, the Fury, they looked really good this weekend. They confirmed the thoughts I had about them after that St. Louis series, that they are a very dangerous team and a team that I cannot wait to see more of. They're a lot of fun to watch. Moving up the list, we now have the San Diego Sockers. And this team overall didn't surprise me a ton this weekend, but their start did surprise me. And that's because they started this series against the Ontario Fury, who I already said was a very good team, but San Diego was really owned by the Fury in that game. And we saw the Sockers having a lot of offensive issues in that game. Now, yes, part of that is the fact that the Fury have an excellent defense, but the Sockers just weren't getting started on offense. And that's something that we saw in the first two games of the season from them as well, a few weeks ago when they were playing Dallas and Kansas City. So I was surprised that San Diego hadn't worked out those issues by the time they played the Fury. Now, as the weekend series progressed and they played against Florida and beat them, and then the Sockers played against the Stars and they beat the Stars as well, we started seeing San Diego look like the San Diego of old, a very dangerous team. I still think their offensive attack doesn't feel like it's firing on all cylinders, but I do think we're finally starting to see the Sockers return to their normal form, and that makes them yet another team in this league that is dangerous and very much contending for the title. Which leaves me with the team that I found to be most surprising this weekend, that being the Tacoma Stars. And I found them surprising in a not great way for the Stars. Yes, the Stars, they did beat the Florida Tropics, which is no small feat, but this entire weekend, I got a sense that their offense just wasn't performing well at all. It really seemed like they were relying on individual performances from their players to score, which they do have players that can do that, but it's not a sustainable model for an offense. And it really felt like their offense was struggling this weekend. Their defense, I thought, looked perfectly serviceable, but their offense, it didn't feel menacing at all. I think is the best way to describe it. If I was on the other team, I wouldn't be terrified really at all by the Stars attack as it is right now. So as someone who really likes the Stars, after the Blast, I would say they're probably my favorite team. I'm a little bit concerned that we're going to see the same pattern we've seen from the Stars in years past, where you start off the season with a team that looks really good, a team that looks really threatening, and then as the season progresses, they regress to mediocrity. I'm afraid that we're going to see that again from them this season, but it could even be worse this season because there are a lot of teams right now that are playing very well, teams that are very dangerous. So if the Stars aren't playing at their full potential, it's going to turn into a long season for them. I hope I'm wrong, and the Stars have plenty of time right now to get things back in order. They're not that far off from being a dangerous team. The pieces are all there. It's just, as they performed this weekend, they're not going to get very far this season as the league is right now. They've got to tune some things up. Next up is a weirdly specific piece of news that I want to talk about, and that is the retro game that will be played this Friday between the San Diego Sockers and the hosting St. Louis Ambush, or should I say, the St. Louis Steamers. For those of you who don't know, this Friday the St. Louis Ambush will be hosting a retro game in which they will be wearing old-time St. Louis Steamers jerseys. And as part of this, the Sockers will also be wearing old-time retro jerseys. Now, the reason I want to talk about this news is because I want to give a lot of credit to these two organizations for both wearing retro jerseys in this game. I have a bit of a pet peeve about retro games, and that is the fact that when you see a team have a retro game, you tend to see the home team wear these cool retro jerseys, And then the visiting team wears just their standard modern jerseys. So it doesn't look quite right on the field. And I really wish that whenever there was a retro game, you saw both teams wearing retro jerseys like we will see this Friday between the Steamers and the Sockers. Now I recognize this wouldn't always work because there are a number of teams in the league that are relatively young and they don't really have retro jerseys, at least not from the 80s and the 90s. But that's okay because I still think they could be wearing jerseys that are artists' interpretations of what their jerseys would have looked like back in those ages. And there's already an example of this in Major League Baseball. A few years ago, the Tampa Bay Rays, who are a team that are only 20 or 25 years old, I believe, they wore jerseys that were artist interpretations of what their jerseys would have looked like many, many years ago. I know not everyone liked those jerseys, but I thought it was such a cool idea. So I'd love to see the MASL use that when needed. In short, whenever there is a retro game, I want to see the home team wearing retro jerseys. Ideally, I want the home team playing a team that was around long ago when that home team was. I want them wearing retro jerseys as well. But if the home team has to be playing one of the more modern teams, I want that modern team wearing jerseys that are artist interpretations of what their jerseys would have looked like 30 or 40 years ago. I recognize this is a very nitpicky criticism of the league, but it is something that has irked me for a while, and I would like to know your thoughts about this. Do you like retro nights? Does anything bother you about retro nights, such as the fact that the away team typically doesn't wear away uniforms? I want to know what you think about this. And with that, I think we can move on to predicting this week's games, and there are only 2 games this weekend, and those 2 games feature the same 2 teams playing each other at the same place. And of course, those teams are the San Diego Sockers and the St. Louis Ambush, or the St. Louis Steamers, as they will be known on Friday. I think this is going to be a great 2-game series. You have 2 teams here that are coming in relatively similar positions. You have the Ambush, who are a team that I think is very good. At one point this season, I was even saying that I thought they were the best team in the league. Yes, I have backed off of that assessment a little bit, but I still think they're very good, especially considering the fact that some of their struggles over the past few weeks have been because of injuries and because of COVID issues. So, really good team that is having some issues as of late, but still a solid team overall. Then you have the Sockers, who are a team that I think are kind of coming into their own. I think we saw that in this Sunshine series from the past weekend, but I still think that their offense isn't clicking at all cylinders. So another team that is very good at their core, but maybe not quite playing to that level right now. So 2 teams in very similar positions. Honestly, I think this is going to be a split. But, as you all know, my strategy in this situation is to pick one team that I think is slightly more likely to sweep the series. And in this case, that has to be the Ambush. I'm assuming that they are going to be at full strength for these games, and if that is the case, I do favor the Ambush ever so slightly over the Sockers to sweep this series. So, for my official predictions, I am predicting the Ambush to win both of these games, or I guess the Steamers will win one of them, but a little more off the record, I think there's going to be a split. And with that, I think I can wrap this episode up, but thank you all so much for watching. While you're here, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you next time.